How is it going, Diablo fans? So this is a guide on all the Paragon strategies for all the builds. So make sure to check the description down below to jump directly to cold builds or whatever builds you want to play. And first of all, I want to go over on how the best glyphs and the glyphs we are going to be using for most of the builds are going to be changing. So before, we always used to play Flame Feeder and Exploit and most of the time Control, because these have great multipliers on them. But now we can only use 5 glyphs, so I feel like the meta is gonna be changing quite a bit because of Enlightenment. Enlightenment basically triples your non-physical damage. So these nodes now give 40% non-physical damage. So let's see what actually happens if we put like a glyph here which actually boosts rare nodes. So for example, we choose Winter here. So what Winter does now is it gives us 109% non-physical damage and 163% damage to elites. So I don't know how big the uptime on Enlightenment is gonna be, but let's just make it double. So I'm not even gonna go with 3 times, I'm just gonna go with doubling it. So I'm doubling the 109% non-physical damage to 220, and I add the 160 damage to elites, so we kind of get, 380%. So let's just make it 400% for it to be more simple. So we get 400% damage out of this Winter Glyph here, plus 55 intelligence, which is probably like somewhere around 2% damage. So now let's compare this to one of the older glyphs, like Flame Feeder, for example. So Flame Feeder here, even though this is, 64, 59 dex is actually not that bad of a board. Flame Feeder just gives us 196, so this is just half of the additive damage. Yes, it gives us another 10% multiplier, but it doesn't give us the intelligence, so I would assume Flame Feeder is falling short here. Same goes with Exploit. Exploit basically just gives us 153% additive damage and, still gives us a 10%, but I feel like this is also falling short. So at least my assumption is that, if you want to reach maximum damage, you kind of focus on the rare boosting nodes. And these are basically like Winter. These are Unleash. Well, Unleash is boosting magical nodes, but it's the same effect. These are Tactician and these are Elementalist. And these are also kind of reinforced. It kind of depends a little bit. But I feel like these nodes are very strong. So if you look at this and we make this a 400%, then on the next board, same story here. We still have pretty much a 400% by using our Tactician here. And then we have another 400% by using our Elementalist here. And then here we are using our Unleash here, which gives us the secondary stats. And also this is another, let's just make it 350% or something like that. The only glyph I still seeing being top of the meta is actually Destruction, because this gives just a high amount of damage. This is 33.4, and this is a 64 dexterity board. The best ones are 74 dexterity, which actually give you roughly 500% critical strike damage. So I think Destruction is still going to be the top glyph here. So now I quickly want to talk about which boards are going to be used in pretty much all of the Sorc build. And it seems like most of the Sorc builds are going to use the same 3 boards and 1 additional one. I feel like there's one little exception for maybe for a Lightning Spear build, but this is also highly conditional. So usually what you're going to do is you're going to use your starter board, then you're going to use the following 3. You're always going to use Fundamental Release because it has a 30% damage node. Then you're always going to use Frigid Fate because it has a 60% damage node. And then most likely, you're always going to use Enchantment Master because this is just a very strong board here. You might want to use Elemental Summoner here. It gives a little bit more attack speed, but I don't think you're going to use Elemental Summoner. I think Enchantment Master is going to be the strongest board here to use. At least in my opinion, because it has like the non-physical damage node, it has the damage to elite node, which are very strong. It has more non-physical damage here with attack speed combined. And remember, non-physical damage basically triple dips with the Enlightenment passive. And then, if you happen to have like 300 Paragon points, this also has very strong secondaries, right? This has maximum life armor nodes here. This has Auras maximum life nodes here. And this has even flat damage reduction nodes and Auras nodes here. And you know what? The Enchantment Master Glyph is not that terrible if you have the spare points to actually choose it. And then you're always going to have one conditional board here. So for example, for Frost build, for Frozen Orb build, this is obviously going to be Icefall. For a fire build, this is most likely going to be Searing Heat. And for a lightning build, this is most likely going to be Burning Instinct, because you can pick up a lot of points with destruction here and crit damage in the middle. So I feel like these 3 boards are always going to be the same. Yes, the glyphs are changing slightly between the builds, but this is probably the boards we're going to play all the time. So let's see the boards and glyphs I'm actually using for pretty much every cold build other than Blizzard. And for Blizzard, I would just really switch one glyph. So first of all, I'm gonna start up with Winter. I know this is not perfect for pushing bosses like very deep into the pit, but for farming, this is certainly the strongest glyph you can pick up whatsoever. So we pick up Winter in the starter board to just boost these non-physical damage and elite damage nodes. Then we do Fundamental Release with Tactician Glyph, again, just to boost the nodes. We pick all the stuff here. Then we do Frigid Fate, and we go for Unleash here, again, to boost the nodes, and also gives us Dexterity and Willpower to maybe reach higher breakpoints. Then we do the Enchantment Master here for picking up all the non-physical damage, and we go for Elementalist to boost even more nodes. And then we have the conditional cold board, which in this case is going to be Icefall here. And, we pick up these non-physical damage like a hit snows. These are pretty nice. And then we put in our Destruction Glyph, which actually works pretty nice in Icefall because we have 64 Dexterity. And, we pick up all these cold damage and vulnerable damage nodes. So I feel like most cold builds are going to be like this. And you're probably going to switch out the Unleash Glyph if you're playing Blizzard for your Stalagmite here. And you can obviously push the additive damage portion of this because you need a lot of intelligence. So let's say we're playing a Blizzard right now, right? We are completely maxing out the intelligence in this board. We're gonna end up with a nice little 380% ice spike damage. So that is actually pretty nice. So I guess this is the change I would make in a Blizzard build here. And if you really want to push boss, then you would probably change the following. You take the Winter out for boss pushing, and we put the Unleash in this starter board here, and just get some random intelligence, so we can boost our non-physical damage nodes, and we get the multiplier, the 8% multiplier of the Unleash glyph here, and we lose the damage to crowd control conditional multiplier here on the what's it called, on the Winter glyph. So let's move on to the fire builds. So fire builds, we are still using mostly the same boards. We're still using the starter board, we're still using the fundamental release, still Frigid Fate, and still Enchantment Master. As I said, these are probably going to be used in all builds. And then I'm switching that up a little bit here. I'm using, in my starter board, I'm using Destruction because I don't have Winter anymore. So this gives a good amount of critical strike damage in the starter boards. It's like 400% with 59 Dexterity. I know there's 74 Dexterity boards, but I feel like the boards are significantly weaker, so I wouldn't use them. And we're gonna get why I'm doing this a little bit later. So same story, I'm still using the Tactician Glyph here to boost the rare nodes. I'm still using the Unleash Glyph here to boost the magic nodes. I'm still using the Elementalist node here to boost the rare nodes. And then we have one more board, and this is the board which is always changing based on the build. So for the fire build, obviously we're going Searing Heat, because Searing Heat is the fire node here. And we're gonna put in our Pyromaniac, again boosting rare nodes. So we're gonna get a nice amount of fire damage and a nice amount of critical strike damage from picking this node, and we're gonna get the 55 intelligence once again. And then, we just pick the critical strike damage, fire damage here in the middle. So I feel like this is going to be the meta for the fire builds. I'm not really covering burning builds because I don't really see them being viable. There might be, burning builds, but it's gonna be the same story, just except for Searing Heat, we're gonna put the Burning Instinct here. So now let's move on to the lightning here. So here I'm switching it up a little bit, but I'm still kind of sticking to the same format. So in my starter board, I put the Unleash glyph this time for the extra damage. And just because I want to use the Destruction glyph in another board this time. Then for the Fundamental Release, I still have the same story, Tactician. For the Frigid Fate, I'm using Reinforced right now. I know it doesn't have like a second multiplicative damage, so you might want to switch this glyph with control or something. So I'm not 100% sure if this glyph is going to be the best for this board, but it still depends on your enlightenment uptime. I really feel like boosting the non-physical damage is more important than, getting another 15% or another more like 10% multiplier on these glyphs. But I might be wrong there. So there might be maybe even a flame feeder, or maybe a control, or maybe, an exploit glyph might be better in this slot, but I'm not entirely sure at this point. And then we still play the enchantment master here with the elementalist glyph, just like before. And then for our last board here, the changing board, basically, I'm using Burning Instinct because it has a 74% dex. So we can basically max out this destruction glyph with almost 500% critical strike damage here, and we can take advantage of these nodes. So I feel like this has going to be a slight edge above, playing the Destruction in the first board and playing the Unleash in this board. Because if you play the Unleash in this board, you actually get a good chunk of critical strike damage from Unleash. But I feel like this might be still a little bit stronger. But I guess in the end, if you swap these two glyphs, it's not going to be a huge difference. I guess it depends a little bit if you are playing Lightning Spear, like if you're playing Splintering Energy Aspect, it might be stronger to put the Destruction Glyph somewhere here and boost this critical strike damage node. But you know what? If you're playing kind of a Lightning Spear build and you're still trying to make it viable, just watch the next section. That is more like a draft, but that is how you could actually play a Lightning Spear build to still try to get the maximum amount of damage out of Lightning Spear. So here I have one more variant, which is for Lightning Spear. So I think Lightning Spear is still going to be a great farming build for doing like low level content or doing like the Kurast Undercity and stuff like that. But I don't think it's going to be any kind of high tier pushing build. Anyway, so we use our Elementalist in the starter board. And then we still use our Tactician Glyph in the Fundamental Release board. In the Frigid Fate board, we still use the Reinforce Glyph here. And then we're going to switch it up. So instead of our Enchantment Master board, we're using the Searing Heat board now because we want to get as much critical strike damage as possible. So we put in our Unleash Glyph here to boost these critical strike nodes. I know this is a fire damage node, which is basically not doing anything, but our focus here is clearly critical strike damage. So we want to get this node here, and we want to get it boosted. And then here in the middle, there's another critical strike cluster. So there's another, 15, 30. So this is another 60% critical strike damage. And I feel like if you want to get the maximum amount of critical strike damage, you should probably choose this board. And then we also have the Burning Instinct board, but this time we put in our Destruction Glyph here with 74 dex for 500% critical strike damage nearly. And then in the middle here, we also have even more critical strike damage going on. Unfortunately, we cannot boost this critical strike damage node here. And that's why I'm saying there is potentially you could get more. You could get another board like Ceaseless Conduit. So if you get Ceaseless Conduit, it has a 74 dexterity, right? So you could potentially use this and then put another crit damage boosting glyph in here. But we don't really have room for this board because this board overall is pretty terrible. It has lightning damage and crackling energy damage, so it basically has a dead node. And these nodes here, yeah, it gives some crit chance, but we really cannot take benefit of all these nodes here, and the other ones are just defensive. So I consider this board being terrible because, you know what? The only board we could replace it with would be Frigid Fate or Fundamental Release, and these boards are just way stronger. So this gives you basically the most amount of critical strike damage you can get for a Lightning Spear build.